All right, let's dive in. We're tackling The Substance today, a film that's causing quite a stir
Oh, yeah.
with its blend of body horror and social commentary. So we've got a whole bunch of reviews and articles
Yeah,
that go way deeper than just the surface ew factor and really dig into what this film is all about.
definitely.
So get ready to explore the dark side of beauty standards and hey, maybe think twice about that anti-aging cream you've been using.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So what really struck you about The Substance? What makes it stand out in the world of horror?
I think it's really how Corley Farjate, the director, uses body horror in this film
Oh,
to
yeah.
show, like, this visceral representation of the anxieties that, like, women in particular face, especially in Hollywood.
Oh, interesting.
It's not just about the physical, like, transformations that we see on screen, but what those changes mean,
Mm.
on a deeper level.
Yeah, you're definitely not watching this one with the lights off. I can tell you that
Yeah.
the film just throws us right into the deep end with Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi Moore, who's this, a former fitness star,
Yeah.
basically gets kicked off her own show for turning 50.
Yeah, it's brutal, right?
And that's where the hook sinks in, I think, for a lot of viewers.
It does.
It's like the film is saying, look, this is how women are judged, especially in an industry that's obsessed with youth.
Absolutely.
It's like holding up this funhouse mirror to Hollywood and reflecting back all these distorted ideas about beauty and like what it means to be relevant.
Yeah.
But then things take a really interesting turn when we're introduced to the substance itself.
Right?
This mysterious black market drug that promises to literally create a younger version of Elizabeth.
Like a copy?
Almost like a clone, right?
Yeah.
But it's not just a simple makeover or a facelift.
Right.
We're talking about literally inhabiting someone else's younger body and life.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, like, what parts of ourselves do we actually value the most? Is it just the outside?
Right, and that's where it gets really creepy.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone who hasn't seen a lot of body horror films, it's a genre that really pushes the boundaries,
Okay.
both visually and thematically.
I see.
Think about The Fly, where the main character transforms and it becomes a metaphor for disease and decay.
So we're not just talking about, like, someone using a little wrinkle cream.
No, no, no.
We're talking full-on body transformations, right? Like
Yeah.
skin splitting, flesh oozing, the whole 9 yards.
Absolutely, Farjate. She really pushes those limits of what people are comfortable seeing on screen.
Oh, wow.
But it's not just about being shocking or gross. It's about using those graphic images as a way to show outwardly the anxieties we all have
Inside
about getting older, about our bodies changing in ways we can't control.
Yeah, like the things we don't want to talk about.
Exactly.
It's interesting you brought up The Fly because one of the articles I read actually compares the two films,
Really?
saying that both use transformation as this, like, metaphor for loss of control.
Right, right.
Like Seth Brundle in The Fly. Elizabeth is also losing control
Yeah,
of her body, of her identity, of her career.
yeah.
But The Substance takes it a step further,
Okay.
adds this whole other layer of, like, social critique,
Definitely.
highlighting how these anxieties are often amplified for women
For sure.
in a culture that is just fixated on youth.
100%.
So it's not just a personal struggle.
No.
It's like it's reflecting a bigger societal problem, right?
It is, and that's where the real horror is, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
So we've got Elizabeth, who is desperate to be young again. And then we have Sue, who is literally that youthful ideal that Elizabeth craves.
Right.
But it's not just a simple, like, before and after story.
No, it's way more complicated than that.
There's a lot more going on here,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to their relationship.
Yes, and that's where The Substance goes beyond your typical body horror film.
Okay.
The relationship between Elizabeth and Sue, it's complicated, very complex. It's not just like competition. It's about this like toxic female rivalry
Oh, interesting.
that's fueled by, what society tells women they should be.
Ah, I see. Societal pressures.
Exactly. It's like they're both trapped in this system that makes women compete against each other,
Yeah.
judging them based on how they look.
Right. And you really feel that tension in their dialogue,
Oh, for sure.
especially when Elizabeth says to Sue, "You're everything I want to be."
Heartbreaking.
It's almost like she's admitting defeat,
Yes.
but there's also this hint of resentment there.
I know, definitely.
It's a loaded line.
Absolutely.
There's so much in there.
Yeah, it's like envy, desperation.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that they're both stuck in this like web of expectations.
That they can't escape from.
Exactly.
And of course, as we might expect, things start to go wrong.
They do.
We see the price Elizabeth pays for, trying to chase these impossible ideals when Sue overstays her welcome.
During the swap.
Yeah, during one of their consciousness swaps.
Yeah.
And this is where the body horror
Oh, yeah.
really kicks in.
It gets intense.
Elizabeth aging accelerates.
It's like, fast forward.
It's like a visual representation
Well, it really, yeah.
of the consequences of her choice.
It's like a visual metaphor.
It's both horrifying
yeah.
and like really tragic.
Yes.
It really highlights the fact that you can't cheat the natural order of things.
You can't, and it shows you what happens when you try.
And the articles I read, they really emphasize the visual effects in this part of the film.
Oh, yeah.
They describe them as like stunning,
Okay.
but also deeply unsettling.
Right.
Just adding to this feeling of like Elizabeth's deterioration.
It's like watching her fall apart.
Yeah, it's not a pretty picture.
No, but it's powerful.
It's not just the physical toll, though.
Yeah.
There's a psychological impact, too.
Of course. I mean, think about Elizabeth's resentment towards Sue.
Yeah.
That speaks to this idea of internalized misogyny that the film is exploring.
Oh, okay.
Instead of seeing Sue as someone who, understands her struggles, who's on her side, she sees her as competition, as a threat.
As a rival.
Yeah, a rival.
It's almost like it's reflecting how society conditions women to view each other.
Exactly.
As that competition.
Not as allies.
Instead of supporting each other.
Right. And that's an uncomfortable truth for a lot of people.
It is. It makes you think, have I ever fallen into that trap?
For sure.
Feeling threatened by another woman's success.
Yeah.
Instead of celebrating it.
It's a tough question.
It is. It's almost like the film is holding up a mirror.
It is.
And asking us to look at our own biases.
Yeah.
How we judge ourselves and other women.
And how we contribute to those systems.
But then, in true the substance fashion, it throws in some dark humor.
Oh, yeah.
It's not all doom and gloom.
Bro.
What did you think about that aspect of the film?
I think that's what makes it so fascinating, It's this blend of horror, social commentary, and this, sly satire that keeps you on the edge of your seat.
So it's not just a straight-up horror film.
No.
It's playing with different genres.
It is, and it works.
Yeah.
Because it allows the audience to confront these really uncomfortable truths without being totally overwhelmed by the darkness.
Without feeling like, completely depressed.
Right, exactly.
Oh, yeah, the satire's sharp.
It is.
I mean, there are lines in this film like, in Hollywood, you're only as good as your last Botox appointment.
Oh, so true.
And it's funny, but it's also kind of terrifying because it's so close to reality.
It is, and that's what makes the substance so compelling. It makes you laugh, and then it makes you think, wait a minute, is this really that far off from how things actually are?
Right. It makes you question the world around you.
It does, and that's a good thing.
And that brings us to the film's influences.
Oh?
Because the substance is clearly drawing inspiration from some major players in the body horror genre.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the articles mention films like The Elephant Man, which, while not traditional body horror, explores similar themes of societal rejection based on physical appearance.
Right.
Then there's The Fly, of course, with the focus on transformation and losing control.
Yeah.
But it goes even deeper.
Okay.
Citing the works of directors like David Cronenberg.
Wait, hold on. For those of us who might not be total film buffs.
Okay, sure.
Can you give us a quick rundown on who Cronenberg is and why he's relevant here?
Okay, so Cronenberg is a filmmaker who's known for exploring body horror. Often pushing the boundaries of what audiences are willing to see.
He likes to shock people.
Yeah, he's fascinated by the intersection of technology and the body and how transformations affect us psychologically.
Interesting. So how does that connect back to the substance?
Well, think about those really graphic transformations in the substance that focus on violating the body and the psychological impact of those changes. It's very similar to what you see in Cronenberg's film.
Oh, I see.
But with the substance, it's told from a distinctly female perspective.
So it's taking his style
Yeah.
and applying it to a different set of experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's also the influence of another filmmaker, Gaspar Noé,
Oh, yes.
who's known for his, well, let's just say his very unique and often controversial style.
Oh, yeah. He's not afraid to push buttons.
No, he's not.
His films often look at the darker side of human nature.
Yeah.
And he uses really intense visuals and psychological discomfort
Okay.
to get a reaction from the audience.
To make you think, to make you feel.
Yeah, to make you feel something, even if it's uncomfortable.
So we're talking about some pretty heavy-hitting influences here.
We are. But what's interesting is that the substance, while drawing from these masters of horror,
Yeah.
it still feels fresh
Yeah.
and relevant.
It's not just a copycat.
No, not at all.
Is it because of Farjit's perspective as a woman filmmaker?
I think that's a big part of it.
Okay.
One of the articles I read, it argues that if a man had directed the substance, the nudity and the body horror,
Right.
it might have been seen as exploitative,
Oh, yeah.
like just catering to the male gaze.
Which, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of in horror.
Way too much.
You know? It's like, enough already with the gratuitous gore
I agree.
and objectification of women's bodies.
Absolutely. But this article is suggesting that Farjit is using those elements in a much more intentional way.
Okay, how so?
It's about, like, taking back control of the narrative,
Interesting.
showing the real consequences,
Yeah.
which can be grotesque,
Yeah.
of the pressures that society puts on women's bodies.
It's like she's saying, hey, this is what it actually feels like
Exactly.
to be constantly judged and scrutinized.
Yes, and the reviews consistently praise Farjit's visual style.
Yeah.
They say the effects are both, like, beautiful
Okay.
and disturbing.
Interesting combination.
They also highlight her use of practical effects,
Okay.
which makes it feel more, like, visceral and realistic.
It's like the difference between seeing a fake spider
Yeah.
and holding a real one.
Exactly. One is just a visual trick, but the other, it gets under your skin.
It makes you feel it.
And that adds to the psychological impact, right?
Yeah.
If it feels real, it's more disturbing.
It gets you on a deeper level.
Absolutely. You're not just watching something disgusting.
Yeah.
You're like feeling that unease and you're connecting it to the film's themes.
You can't escape it.
No, you can't.
Okay, but one thing that I keep seeing in the reviews is the film's sense of humor.
Oh, yeah. The humor.
Apparently, the substance is actually pretty funny at times.
It is. And that's what I think is so clever about it.
Really?
It's not just like this bleak, depressing horror film.
Right.
There's this layer of satire that, like, almost winks at the audience,
Yes.
acknowledging how absurd the whole situation is.
Like, come on, guys. This is crazy, right? Like those lines we mentioned earlier about Botox in Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny, but it's also scary because it's not that far from reality.
Not at all.
So it's walking a fine line
It is.
between humor and horror.
And Farjit pulls it off.
Yeah.
The humor doesn't, like, take away from the horror. It actually makes it stronger.
So it's not undermining the message?
No, it's enhancing it.
Okay.
It makes those difficult themes a little bit easier to handle
Right.
while still having a real impact.
So beyond all the body horror and the satire and the feminist themes, what is the substance really trying to say? What's the core message here?
At its heart, I think it's a commentary on the impossible beauty standards that women face, particularly in a culture that's obsessed with youth.
Yeah, it's like this constant pressure
Has to
informed to stay relevant no matter what it costs.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter what you have to do to get there.
It's like a cautionary tale, but instead of a lecture,
Yeah.
we get skin peels and body swaps.
It's a more engaging way to explore these issues.
Definitely, it's horror with a message.
It is. It's smart horror
And that brings us back to Elizabeth and Sue.
to the heart of it.
They represent two sides of the same coin, right?
They do. Elizabeth is the aging woman, desperately clinging to what's left of her youth.
Yeah.
And Sue is the embodiment of that youthful ideal that society worships.
But neither of them is truly free.
No, they're both trapped.
It's kind of tragic when you think about it.
It is. They're both victims of the same system,
Yeah.
caught in this cycle of desire and resentment.
One of the reviews called it a dance of desire and resentment.
Oh, I love that.
I thought that was a brilliant observation.
It is. It really captures their dynamic.
They're drawn to each other,
Yes.
but also repelled by what the other represents.
That's push and pull.
Yeah, and I think the performances by Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley really elevate that aspect of the film.
They're both incredible.
The reviews are praising their chemistry,
Yeah.
saying they bring a lot of nuance and depth to these characters.
Absolutely. It's not just about the physical transformations.
Right.
It's about capturing that internal struggle, the desperation, the sadness that both women are going through.
It sounds like they're not just playing characters.
No.
They're embodying these very real anxieties that a lot of women face.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes the substance so effective.
Yeah.
It's entertaining, but it's also thought-provoking.
It gets under your skin.
It does.
Yeah.
And it starts conversations that need to be had.
Absolutely. And before we move on to our final thoughts on the substance,
Okay.
let's hear from you.
Yes. Let's hear what you think.
What are your thoughts on Elizabeth and Sue? Do you find yourself sympathizing with either of them more? And what do you make of their complex relationship?
We want to hear from you.
Share your thoughts with us.
They're fascinating characters, aren't they?
Really interesting dynamic between them.
And yeah, so much to unpack there.
Absolutely. So we were talking about influences before the break.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And, it seems like the substance is drawing from a lot of these heavy hitters in the horror world.
It is. It's like it's paying homage to them in a way,
Yeah.
but it also feels like its own thing,
It doesn't feel like a cheap imitation or anything like that.
No, not at all. It's got its own voice.
So do you think that's because of Farjate's perspective, as a woman filmmaker?
I think that's definitely a key element here.
Yeah.
One of the articles actually digs into this, saying that if a man had directed The Substance,
Okay.
the nudity in the body horror might have been seen as just like exploitative.
Oh, yeah.
Just for shock value.
Like playing to the male gaze.
Exactly, which sadly we've seen a lot of in horror films.
Way too much.
But this article, it argues that Farjate is using those elements in a much more deliberate way.
No, it's not just gratuitous, it's purposeful.
Right, it's about reclaiming control over the narrative
Okay, I like that.
and showing the real consequences, which could be pretty gruesome.
They're pretty intense.
Of those societal pressures on women's bodies.
It's like she's saying, look, this is what it feels like.
Yeah, this is the reality.
To be constantly judged and picked apart.
And the reviews, they consistently praise Fargate's visual style,
Oh, really?
saying that the effects are both beautiful
Okay.
and disturbing.
That's an interesting combination.
It is, and they highlight her use of practical effects,
Yeah.
which makes it feel more like visceral
Yeah.
and real.
Like you're actually there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the difference between seeing a fake spider and actually holding a real one.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
One is just a visual trick, but the other, it makes your skin crawl.
You feel it.
Yeah, you feel it.
And that probably adds to the psychological impact.
Oh, absolutely. If it feels real, it gets under your skin.
It messes with your head.
Exactly. You're not just watching something disgusting. You're feeling that unease, and you're connecting it back to those themes.
You can't escape it.
Yep, you can't.
Okay, but one thing I keep seeing in these reviews is the film's sense of humor.
Oh, yeah, the humor.
Apparently, the substance is actually pretty funny at times.
It is, and that's what makes it so clever.
Really?
It's not just this dark, depressing horror movie. There's this layer of satire that, like, winks at the audience.
Oh, okay, like it's self-aware.
Exactly, like acknowledging the absurdity of the whole situation.
Like, come on, guys, this is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like those lines we mentioned earlier about Botox in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's funny, but it's also kind of scary because it's so close to reality.
It's not that far off.
So it's walking this fine line between humor and horror.
It is, and Fargate pulls it off beautifully.
The humor doesn't take away from the horror.
No, it actually enhances it.
Interesting.
And makes those really heavy themes a little bit easier to digest.
Right.
But they still hit hard.
They still have an impact.
Absolutely.
So beyond all the body horror and the satire and the feminist themes, what's the substance really trying to say? What's the core message here?
I think at its heart, it's a commentary on the impossible beauty standards that women face, particularly in a culture that's obsessed with youth.
It's this constant pressure
Relentless.
to conform, to stay relevant, no matter what the cost.
No matter what you have to sacrifice.
It's like a cautionary tale, but instead of like a boring lecture,
Right.
we get, skin peels and body swap.
It's definitely a more engaging way to explore these issues.
It's horror with a purpose.
Smart horror.
And that brings us back to Elizabeth and Sue.
The heart of the film.
They really represent two sides of the same coin, don't they?
They do. Elizabeth is the aging woman who's, desperately clinging to the last bits of her youth.
Yeah.
And Sue is that useful ideal, the one that society worships.
But neither of them is truly free.
No, they're both trapped in this system.
It's tragic when you think about it.
It really is. They're both victims in a way.
Yeah, caught in the cycle of desire and resentment.
One review called it a dance of desire and resentment, which I thought was brilliant.
Oh, I love that.
It really captures their dynamic perfectly.
They're drawn to each other, but they're also repulsed by what the other represents.
It's a constant push and pull.
Yeah, and I think Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, their performances really bring that to life.
Oh, they're incredible in this film.
The reviews are raving about their chemistry.
Yeah, it's electric.
They say they bring so much nuance and depth to these characters.
Absolutely. It's not just about the physical changes. It's about showing that internal struggle, the desperation, the sadness that they're both experiencing.
It's like they're not just acting, they're living these
I
anxieties.
embody those fears.
And I think that's what makes the substance so effective.
It's what elevates it.
It's entertaining, but it's also thought-provoking.
It stays with you.
It gets under your skin.
It sparks those important conversations.
Absolutely. So before we move on to our final thoughts on the substance,
Yeah.
I want to hear from you.
Let's hear what you think.
What are your thoughts on Elizabeth and Sue?
Do you sympathize with one more than the other?
And what about their relationship? What do you make of that? We really want to hear your thoughts on this one.
So many layers to this film.
Right? Definitely. A lot to think about.
And even with all that, the body horror, the social commentary, it's still entertaining.
Oh, absolutely. You're not bored for a second.
It keeps you hooked.
It does. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to get to the heart of it.
Okay, yeah.
What does it all mean?
Yeah.
What's the takeaway for us, the viewers?
I think this substance serves as this, stark warning about how obsessed we are with youth
Ah, okay.
and the lengths people go to for acceptance.
It's like the film is holding up a mirror
It is.
and saying, hey, look at yourselves. Look at what you're doing.
Yeah, confront those anxieties about getting older, about fading away.
And it does it in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
It's a tough balance to strike, but I think Farjate nails it.
She does. The film doesn't offer any easy answers, does it?
No, not at all.
It's more about asking the hard questions.
Yeah, what are we willing to sacrifice to fit in?
Yeah,
How do we define beauty? And where do we find our self-worth?
those are big questions.
They are, but they're important ones.
And the film's use of body horror, it's so effective in driving those points home.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just about being shocking. It's about taking those anxieties,
Yeah.
making them real.
Visceral. You can't ignore them.
It's like those anxieties are given a physical form.
Made monstrous.
And that's what makes it so unsettling.
Because we all have those fears.
About getting older, about losing ourselves.
They're real. And the film doesn't shy away from that.
And it also highlights how these pressures, they affect women in a really specific way.
They do. There's a reason why Elizabeth, the aging actress, is the one going through these transformations.
Right, it's not a coincidence.
It shows how women are often judged more harshly based on their looks, their age.
Yeah, those double standards are definitely at play.
Absolutely.
And then there's the dark humor.
Oh, yeah, the humor.
It's like the film is giving us a moment to breathe,
Yeah.
to laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Even while we're squirming in our seats.
It's a clever way to deal with some pretty heavy themes.
Farjik really knows how to balance those elements.
So what's the lasting impact of the substance? What do you hope people take away from it?
I hope it makes people question those societal standards.
Yeah,
The ones that tell us what's beautiful, what's desirable.
it's challenging those norms.
It is. And I hope it starts conversations about how we value ourselves and others.
About challenging those expectations.
Exactly. Because they can be so harmful.
It's a film that sticks with you.
It does. It gets under your skin.
And I think it accomplishes something really unique.
What's that?
It makes you think about these complex issues even while you're watching these, sometimes disturbing images.
That's the power of good horror.
Yeah, it taps into our fears, but it also makes us think critically.
About ourselves, about the world around us.
Well said. So if you're ready for a film that's going to challenge you, make you squirm a little, and maybe even make you laugh, definitely check out The Substance.
Reddit.
And if you're interested in those influences we talked about, definitely dive into the works of David Cronenberg and Gaspar Noé.
The masters of the genre.
They are, and their films offer a really fascinating lens through which to view The Substance.
They provide some great context.
They do. So that's it for our deep dive on The Substance. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Let us know what you think, what resonated with you, what scared you, and what questions it left you with. Until next time, happy viewing.